Looks like we are live on Facebook. So welcome everybody to our book club for July. Today we're actually going to be discussing some of the key insights and themes in the one of the classics, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. So thank you for everyone who's joined us on today's Zoom call. Thank you for Katrina as well, who's co-hosting from PBS, and thank you to everybody who's connected with us through the Facebook live stream as well. So there's actually a lot of content to cover in this book. I actually really enjoyed it and benefited from it. I think the book was really good and just going through some fundamental truths and basics and just human relationships, human interaction, just common etiquette, how to be a good person, how to be likable, which I thought was just really, really good. So a lot of the key things that I'll be going through today are more things that aren't going to be mind-blowing. Oh, I've never thought about that. It's just a key reminder for how to be a likable person and how to influence people as well to be agreeable with you. So I will be going through it point by point. Some of the key concepts that Dale shares in the book. Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in if you wanted to share an experience or a thought. And feel free for those on Facebook to leave a comment with your feedback as well. So, Katrina, are you good for me just to keep running with it?
Yeah. I'll just that sounds like a plan. I'll just monitor those comments on Facebook, and you could probably see them come through the Zoom meeting as well. So this is an interesting book. I was just talking before we got started that I'd actually downloaded it on Audible, and there was one that was talked about in the digital age. So I'm not sure how much of an updated version it is, but as we were speaking before, Amar, that these are the tips and topics that are essential in all types of conversations and relationships. So it doesn't matter if it's digital or in face to face. It's a lot of good information to remind ourselves about how our behaviour can be perceived and how we can improve it to improve our relationships.
Fantastic. Totally agree. Now, I won't be monitoring the comments. So if there is a comment, if you could read it out for me, that would be fantastic, or feedback. So Dale actually starts the book by saying that 15% of research has shown that 15% of one's financial success is due to their technical knowledge, and 85% is due to their skill in human engineering. So based on their personality characteristics and their ability to lead people. And that's why this book, it is really important for all of us, not just in our personal lives, but also in business. So he was saying one of the key prime interests of adults is health, but the second is actually people. So how to understand and get along with people, how to make people like you, and how to win others to your way of thinking, which would some of the key objectives that he tries to teach in this book. So I'm going to go through, firstly, the part one of the book is just fundamental techniques in handling people, and we'll go through it step by step. So the first one is, if you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. So in this, Dale is saying criticism is futile because it puts a person on the defensive and usually makes him strive to justify himself. Criticism is dangerous because it wounds a person's pride, hurts his sense of importance, and arouses resentment. So what he's explicitly stating is it's much harder to encourage someone to portray a certain behavior by punishing, but studies have shown that by actually rewarding the good behavior, you're more likely to get the result that you want. So, and as part of that as well, he gives an example of where in the book, a pilot There was a technical issue with a mechanic who made a mistake, and the pilot almost crashed his jet. And he just managed to survive. But he didn't scold the mechanic. He actually went up to the mechanic, put his arm around him and said, "To show you that I'm sure you'll never do this again, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow." And it's that encouragement, it's that belief, even when someone makes a mistake, whether it's an employee or a client or an acquaintance, it's that encouragement that you've got faith in them, you believe in them. It actually lifts people to perform versus criticizing when they make a mistake. And I thought that example was really important. So instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's figure out why they do what they do, and build the sympathy, build the tolerance and kindness rather than criticizing. So don't criticize, condemn, or complain. He then goes on the big secret of dealing with people. And so he was saying one of the deepest urges in human nature is the desire to be important, and the craving to be appreciated as well. So there's nothing that kills ambitions of a person as much as criticism. So he says he never criticizes anyone. He believes in giving a person an incentive to work. So he's anxious to praise, but loath to find fault. So if he finds anything that he likes, he makes a really concerted effort to lavish positive feedback and praise as well. So he's reiterating the point that honest appreciation gets a lot more results, a lot better results, where criticism and ridicule actually fails. He then goes on to talk about the only way to influence other people is to talk about what they want and show them how to get it. So when you're trying to get somebody to do something, for example, you don't want your kids to smoke, he's saying don't preach at them. Don't talk about what you want, but show them that cigarettes may keep them from making the basketball team or winning the 100-yard dash. If that's something that they want, that's something that's important to them, connect the negatives of smoking to something that they really care about, which might be making the basketball team. So if you want to persuade someone to do something, before you speak, pause and ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do it? That question on its own will stop us rushing into a situation heedlessly with futile chatter about our own desires. So rather than focusing on what we want, focus on what they want and connect the action to that.
Sorry, Omar, just wanted to interrupt you there a second, if that's all right.
Go for it.
It's interesting what you're saying about, I mean, basically to me, this book was really all about good manners at the end of the day, and it's mostly about thinking about other people, like you were just saying. And it's very interesting because especially in the times that we're going through at the moment, I think very few people are doing that. A lot of people are just thinking about themselves at the moment, and very few people are thinking about other people and about other people's points of view and trying to put themselves in other people's shoes. And so that's why I think I mean, if we could all adopt what Dale Carnegie was talking about, and we could all adopt those ways of behaving, we would all be a lot better off. But it's not happening. In fact, if anything, at the moment, completely the opposite is happening, I think, in this, as I say, this current climate. It's quite sad to see, because he wrote this book, back in 1930s, I think.
Yeah.
And here we are nearly 100 years later, and not much has changed.
Nothing.
Anyway.
No, that's right.
I just wanted to put that in there because, I mean, basically, as I say, like, it really is about common sense. It's about doing the right thing and to other people. It's about good manners. It's about listening to other people. It's about taking on their point of view, understanding their arguments, trying to talk openly about things, and but people get very entrenched in their way of thinking, and it's very, very hard to change that. Anyway.
Very true. I totally agree, and I thank you for sharing that. Sorry, was someone going to say something?
Yes, I was. Apologies
Hi,
first
Debbie.
for being late. I had a meeting that I was just madly finishing off. But interesting you should say that, Kerry, because I think I read somewhere on post on Facebook about someone that went through the World Wars or the Second World War, and they were, short of food. They couldn't get flour, sugar, all those basic things. They've got 6 kids, they're hungry and all that. And their neighbour would come and give them, a cup of flour, even though they only had a little bit themselves. They would share what they had. And it's sad to see in this current climate that when they were talking about lockdowns and people had this scarcity mentality, and they emptied all the supermarket shelves without any, and then you go in, because it happened to me, I went in going, what just happened? I just went in to buy my normal, and people are buying truckloads of toilet paper and stuff. And, it's just, I agree with you, Kerry. It is a unfortunate thing at the moment, but, and the woman in the post that I read was thinking how sad it was that something has changed. And to go back to Dale Carnegie's basic fundamental principles of decent human behaviour is something that is sorely needed.
Totally agree. Thank you for sharing that, Debbie. And I think as well as focusing on those, the good behaviour, the way he does it in the book is he focuses on how that good behaviour benefits you in getting what you want to achieve. So rather than just good behaviour for the good of humanity, the way he writes the book is mainly on do this, have these good characteristics to achieve what you want, to influence people to get the right result without, which I thought was a good way to construct it as well, because the opposite of that, which he also covers in the book, is ineffective and isn't going to get the results that you want. So really he's trying to encourage that this good behavior isn't just for the good of humanity, but it also gets you to the result that you want to achieve more effectively rather than the other side of it. So part 2 goes through 6 ways to make people like you. And please, for everybody, because I do have a lot to cover, so I am going to go through it, but I want you to unmute yourself and jump in as I go. So don't hesitate to do that. So number 1, do this and you'll be welcome anywhere. So you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. So if you want to make friends, greet people with animation and enthusiasm. When somebody calls you on the telephone, use the same psychology. Say hello in tones that bespeak how pleased you are to have the person call. Even on the phone, people can sense the smile. They can sense that positive energy as well. And he reminds us that we are interested in others when they are interested in us. So become genuinely interested in other people. So that was the lesson number 1 in getting people to like you. Lesson number 2 was a simple way to make a good first impression. Actions speak louder than words, and a smile says, I like you. You make me happy. I am glad to see you. Everyone in the world is seeking happiness, and there's one way to find it. That's by controlling your thoughts. Happiness doesn't depend on outward conditions. It depends on your inner condition. It isn't what you have or who you are or where you are or what you are doing that makes you happy or unhappy. It is what you think about it. So
Sorry, Aim, I just wanted to interrupt there because
Please
there's a really
do.
good example. There was a really good example in the book about this guy who never smiled and who was grumpy all the time. And then one day he followed that principle and he said, okay, well, I'll just smile from here on in. And so in the morning, so he just slapped a smile on his face. And do you remember that part? And his wife said, what's going on here? And his life completely turned around just from smiling. People would smile at him in the street. People, all the whole positive attitude that people showed him just because he smiled. And that's not a very big thing to do, really.
No, and it's really true. I'm sure we've all actually experienced it. When we're in a really good mood that we can't stop smiling, others will smile back at you. Others will look at you and you end up passing that positive energy, that happiness onto others. It's like they become a mirror of you, because it's contagious. So I do think you could even try it yourself, just for one day. Just make an effort. Any person you see saying, "Morning, mate, how you going? How good is this weather?" And see the reaction you'll get, versus just heads down and walking past somebody. It's a completely different reaction. And not only is it just a good reaction, but you end up making that person's morning as well. So it does have quite a profound impact. So he actually gives
another comment about the first.
Please do.
I'm sorry, I can make a comment. I know you've got a lot to get through, but
no. I want you to. Otherwise, I'm going to be. Go ahead.
Good. It's a great marketing strategy as well. I was thinking about when I would network. You go into a networking meeting and you've got a bunch of people there that you don't know, you haven't met before. If you go up to a person and get them talking with a genuine interest in their business and their world, it's a great networking strategy, a great marketing strategy.
Actually, sorry, that also reminds me also once, many years ago, I used to work for a PR company. This is like long time ago. And there was this one account manager. She used to have a mirror in front of her every time she made a phone call to remind herself to smile, so that she would be smiling every time she made a phone call, because you can hear it in people's voices when they smile. So
that's brilliant. That's a great idea. Thank you guys for sharing. So tip number 3, I'm just going to skim over it. It's effectively remember names. Make the time, take the effort to remember names, because it actually has a big impact on the people who get surprised that you actually remembered their names. So tip number 4 on being likable. So an easy way to become a good conversationalist. So listen intently. Listen because you're genuinely interested. The other person feels that genuine interest and they're naturally pleased because of it. So the highest compliment you could give to the person you're engaging with is by actively listening. So he's saying there's no mystery about successful business intercourse. Exclusive attention to the person who is speaking to you is very important. Nothing else is so flattering as that. So if you aspire to be a good conversationalist, be an attentive listener. To be interesting, be interested. Ask questions that other people will enjoy answering. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Remember that the people you are talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves and their wants and problems than they are in you and your problems. A person's toothache means more to that person than a famine in China, which kills 1 million people. Think of that the next time you start a conversation. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Tip number 5 is how to interest people. So he gives the example of Roosevelt. So when Roosevelt expects a visitor, he sat up late at night, the night before, reading up on the subject, which he knew that his guest was particularly interested in. Because he knew that the road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures most. So talk in terms of the person's interests. And how to make people like you instantly. Jesus sums it up in one thought. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. You want the approval of those with whom you come in contact. You want recognition of your true worth. You want a feeling that you are important in your little world. You don't want to listen to cheap, insincere flattery, but you crave sincere appreciation. You want your friends and associates to give you praise. All of us want that. So let's obey the golden rule and give unto others what we would have others give unto us. Part 3 goes into how to win people to your way of thinking. So now he's going into the influencing part of the book. So the first point he makes is you can't win an argument. If you've got to try and let the other person save face. If he didn't ask for your opinion, he didn't want it. Why argue with him? Don't try and make the other person you're arguing with feel uncomfortable and put them in an embarrassing situation. Kerry, were you going to share something?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, that one, because it's like, you know, if somebody says something that's really contentious, that you find really contentious, it's like, what do? Do you like kind of shut your mouth and not say anything because you don't want to get into an argument? Or that's what I found it. Yes, I agree, you shouldn't get into an argument because things get very heated. But at the same time, if somebody says, as I can't think of, I mean, like, for example, at the moment, all this anti-vaccination stuff, and you don't feel the same way, do you just walk away and go, whatever? That's what I must say. So it's a bit, I agree with what he said, but at the same time, don't you need to express your opinion? And that's I don't know.
I think you would equate it to when you are when you're dealing with children, like pick the battles. So if it's not worth a battle, then perhaps just let it lie and not enter into that argument. You could possibly, in that instance, you know, say what your thoughts are, but let's not get into a battle and a debate about it. So it's like, yeah, pick your arguments or pick your fights. If it's big enough to make an impact.
But I think Dale Carnegie, because I think he was saying don't argue at all, didn't he? He was saying.
So it's based on that word specifically, argument. So discussions and respecting opinion is the most important thing. It's the arguments itself where when you argue, you're most likely going to be offending that person's pride. And as soon as you do that, you lock that person into a defensive position where they feel obliged to defend their position because it becomes my position versus yours. And later on, he then talks through the Socrates method and how you start with a yes, yes position rather than when you put someone in a no, no position. Even though they might actually be open to your way of thinking, they feel stuck in their corner defending their argument just to save face and pride. Okay, so he goes through and he says, to keep a disagreement from becoming an argument, welcome the disagreement. Remember the slogan, when two partners always agree, one of them is not necessary. Perhaps this disagreement is your opportunity to be corrected before you make a serious mistake. Distrust your first instinctive impression. Your first reaction to be in that disagreeable situation is to be defensive. Be careful, keep calm, and watch out for your first reaction.
And would you say, Amar, that, and speaking to your point, Kerry, some people are actually argumentative and they enjoy the fight. They just do it, and they push buttons and they do it deliberately to antagonize you, and especially for something really important. So I think it's like stepping back and using wisdom and really, am I going to get into an argument with an anti-vaxxer? No, I'm not. You're entitled to your opinion. I don't agree with it, but walk away, kind of thing. And like Katrina said, pick your battles and be mindful to protect yourself from people that are deliberately argumentative.
True. And focus on what you can agree on. Obviously, if you can't agree on a single, so break down the argument and focus on what they can say yes to, and maybe stop it there. And hopefully then they could make the connection. So listen, give them a chance to explain. Don't go into that argumentative, because that's just going to build higher and higher barriers. Look for areas of agreement, and focus on those yes components of the argument. It's going to be more effective, rather than focusing on what you disagree on.
And just to recap with that yes you mentioned, Amar, perhaps you got a little bit of an explanation for those?
Yeah, and I will get to it.
You are getting to that.
Let's park that, and because I do want to cover it, because I actually really enjoyed that as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna skip ahead. If a person makes a statement that you think is wrong, even if you know is wrong, isn't it better to begin by saying, well, I thought otherwise, but I might be wrong. I frequently am. And if I am wrong, I want to be put right. Let's examine the facts first. So there's positive magic in phrases such as, I may be wrong. Let's examine the facts. When someone expresses some feeling or belief, our tendency is almost immediately to feel that's right, or that's stupid, or that's abnormal, or that's unreasonable, that's incorrect, that's not nice. Very rarely do we permit ourselves to understand precisely what the meaning of the statement is to the other person. So not necessarily what the statement means, but what it means to the other person. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is exactly like the 7 principles of highly effective people. He said exactly the same thing, where you have to, you try. So if somebody comes along who's got a different opinion to yours, it's like that's fantastic, because I can ask you all sorts and try and understand where you're coming from. Instead of just reacting and going, no, you're wrong, you're bad. It's actually really digging down and asking them. And so you can really get sort of just get another view, another perspective from somebody else's opinion.
That's
and it's
right.
very similar. I mean, they're basically saying the same thing, I think.
That's right. And even just statements like, in certain cases or circumstances, your opinion would be right. But in the present circumstance, under this situation, it doesn't appear to me that it is. And you'll find a change in manner, because you're actually giving credit to what the other person is saying in that specific situation, but not in a different situation. It becomes easier to accept when you're putting some positivity to it in certain situations. Okay. Then the next step, I'm just going to go through it quickly, is if you're wrong, it quickly. A drop. So he goes through a drop of honey. So he says, if you come at me with your fists doubled, I think I can promise you that mine will double as fast as yours. But if you come to me and say, let us sit down and take counsel together, and if we differ from each other, understand why it is that we differ, just what the points at issue are, we will find that we're not as far apart as we might seem, that the points that we differ on are few, and the points that we agree on are many. That creates a much more positive environment from which to have a discussion on. So it's an old and true. Go ahead, Deb.
Sorry, I was just going to, sorry for jumping in again. But this is exactly right. And that's why when, you know, like all these people who are at war and all these people who are arguing, if they actually sat down together, they'd realize they had so much in common. You know, they all want to have, you know, they want shelter for their family. They want their kids to have a good education. They want all these things. And there they are fighting and fighting when really at the basis of it all, they all want the same thing. And that's the irony of it all. They don't, you know, but unfortunately, they never sit around the table and have a good, honest discussion about what they really want at the end of the day. There you go.
Yeah, and that's a really good
world
point.
affairs solved.
And it probably, you know, at the heart of that is what is their motivation. You know, a lot of wars, I don't think a lot of their motivation is to get to the truth. I think there's a lot of power and financial interests involved there as well, rather than to be agreeable or to reach a common ground of mutual interest. But that,
thinking about that with the IRA and all the, I don't know how many generations of years that went for, and then they sat down and had a discussion, and then they just decided to put down the weapons. Perhaps it was a new generation that realized, you know, this is just killing our children. So let's have a chat. That's a very simplified version, but I always was puzzled by that. But I guess that's how wars come and go as well. You know, where in the Olympics are in Japan now and all that sort of stuff. So it's a new generation.
Very true. So now we're going to touch on the secret of Socrates, which is the yes method that we spoke about earlier. So in talking with people, don't begin by discussing the things on which you differ. Begin by emphasizing and keep on emphasizing the things on which you agree. Keep emphasizing, if possible, that you are both striving for the same end, and that your only difference is one of method and not of purpose. Get the other person saying yes, yes at the outset. Keep your opponent, if possible, from saying no. A no response is the most difficult handicap to overcome. When you have said no, all your pride of personality demands that you remain consistent with yourself. You may later feel that the no was ill-advised. Nevertheless, there is your precious pride to consider. Once having said a thing, you feel you must stick to it. Hence, it's of the greatest importance that a person be started in the affirmative direction. On the contrary, when a person says yes, none of the withdrawal activities takes place. They've become to have an accepting, open attitude. Hence, the more yeses we can at the very outset induce, the more likely we are to succeed in capturing the attention of our ultimate proposal. So this whole technique is captured within what is the Socratic method, which was based on getting a yes, yes response. So Socrates would ask questions with which his opponents would have to agree. He kept on winning one admission after another until he had an armful of yeses. He kept on asking questions until finally, almost without realizing it, his opponents found themselves embracing a conclusion they would have bitterly denied a few minutes previously. The next time we are tempted to tell someone he or she is wrong, let's remember old Socrates and ask a gentle question, a question that will get the yes, yes response. Okay, then he goes through handling complaints. So most people trying to win others to their way of thinking do too much talking themselves. Let the other people talk themselves out. They know more about their business and problems than you do. So ask them questions. Let them tell you a few things. If you disagree with them, you may be tempted to interrupt, but don't. It's dangerous. They won't pay any attention to you while they still have a lot of ideas of their own crying for expression. So listen patiently and with an open mind. Be sincere about it. Encourage them to express their ideas fully. And I thought that was quite interesting. Keen to get your feedback as well. I do find if you're talking to someone and you don't let the other person fully express what they wanted to express, if you interrupt, they're not going to be listening to you. They're going to be trying to remember what they wanted to express, but you didn't give them the full chance to do. So let them get everything out first.
I can remember, and this is a practical application of that lesson. Many years ago, I had a very unhappy client, and he was not just unhappy, he was very angry. And I had one of my specialists looking after him, so I got the story from her, and then he wanted to have a meeting with me, and he was literally banging his fist on the desk, and physically he was all of this and very, very angry. And I just sat there on the other side of the desk, and I just was calm. I said, just a moment, I just want to write that down. And so I wrote down what his point was, and I said, and is there anything else? And he bang on the desk. Yes, yes as well. Okay, right, okay, just a minute. I want to make sure that I'm understanding fully what the issues are. Right, anything else? And I just kept coming back until he was actually, all that pent-up energy that he had he was calm by the end of that. And so then I said, right, now I'm just going to go through each of the points that you've made, because I want to make sure that that I've understood completely what your problem is. And at the end of it, the whole, like, it's 45 minutes or something, and quite intense. But the whole time I remained calm and just worked through and just kept asking, what next, what next, what else, what else? And at the end, he thanked me, he hugged me, he said how awesome I was and my team is fantastic. And because he didn't have anything, he had pent up anger and frustration and directed it to me. But that technique worked beautifully.
And so why do you think it changed so dramatically? What was it that you did for him that made him have such a positive reaction?
I made sure that he could see that I was going to resolve this one way or the other. If it was an apology, I would apologize, if whatever it was, but I had to hear him out. I wanted to make sure that there was, so he didn't come back and say, but you didn't hear me, or you haven't, you interrupted and I haven't finished speaking and all of that. So I didn't feel compelled to, hang on a minute, I'm not going to, you've said something, whatever he said. And as he's saying things, I'm thinking, okay.
But I think the other thing is that you gave him an opportunity to you gave him his voice. You gave him an opportunity to talk, like you're just saying, Emma. Probably nobody up until then had listened to him. As soon as he got angry, they probably would have dismissed him and said, "I'm not listening." But you allowed him to talk.
Yeah, or would have sacked him or something. The thing is, he was feeling frustration, but it actually it wasn't anything to do with me or anything my staff did, but we were kind of on the fringe of it, and we just got swept up in his cyclone of anger and frustration about it. And so to just have a different energy, so my energy is down here, his energy is way up here, and so I just brought him down to, and he understood, he really felt, he felt that I really appreciated. I was really trying to solve this problem for him. And to
Well, you actually heard him. In fact, Emma, which that's exactly what that's exactly the point. Is that without listening through, without actually hearing, you make up your mind about stuff. You know, you're like kind of already thinking what you're going to answer. You're already, again, it's that 7 principles. He says the same. And so, but Debbie, you actually sat down and listened to him all the way through, and then you realized it actually didn't have anything to do with you, whereas everybody else was probably assuming it had something to do with them because he was getting angry. But because you allowed him to talk right through to the end and listen to him, then it was a different outcome.
The other, which I didn't mention, he actually brought his 2 sons with him as well. So, and they were in business with him. So it was very interesting. But I actually applied, I didn't get caught up in his stuff. I felt I could look at the situation objectively, even though he was having a full-on go at me. Because I'd done a bit of research as well, it wasn't like if I hadn't have spoken to my bookkeeper who did the work, who was a specialist and excellent and all of that, I would have been thinking, oh my goodness, how is this really true? But because I'd already spoken to her, I felt armed, and so I didn't need to engage. I'm not having an argument with you. I just want to listen and then explain what's happening and what we're doing now and how we're moving on from that.
And I think it comes back to the first thing we said at the beginning of this conversation, which is the research that he shares, is that, you know, your success is 15% is technical, which could be you are wrong based on Section 25C of the GST Act. 85% is this social skills, right? That emotional IQ part. That's 85% of the success that you had in that interaction, was your ability to actually empathize, to listen, to let the other person know that they're being heard. What they're saying is being understood and processed, and it's important. I think that's the 85% of it. It's not hurting their pride. Yeah. It's not hurting their intelligence. It's because you're effectively, by doing that, you are saying you're important. What you're saying is important, whether it's wrong or right. And I'm listening. And that's what people want. So it's why it's 85% of a successful interaction. So he goes on to quote a French philosopher as well. If you want enemies, excel your friends. But if you want friends, let your friends excel you. So why is that true? Because when your friends excel us, they feel important. But when we excel them, they, or at least some of them, will feel inferior and envious. Your friends have things that they want to boast about, that they're excited about telling you about their accomplishments, and they, rather than listening to your own boasting. So when you have time to chat, ask them to share their joys and only mention your achievements when asked. So let the other person do the great deal of talking and focus on talking about their achievements, which will then bring them joy.
And this can also, that principle can be applied very successfully when you're growing a team, bringing it back to having a team and business and things like that. Because I often, whether I contributed or influenced the work that my team did, I always made sure I didn't want any credit for it. So I wanted them, we elevated them in the team and edified them, and I made sure that they got the accolades and the respect of the team and of the rest of the team. And I think that's one way of applying that principle. You know, rather than me walk in and say, look how good I am, let me tell you how good I am, and the bookkeepers there going, well, hang on, I did the work, you know, so they don't feel very good about themselves because there was no competition. Wasn't competing with my team. I wanted them to be better than me. And so I would always be edifying them so that they were better than me and getting the credit and wanting to be more of that.
Exactly right. And that actually leads into the next point, which is how to get cooperation. So if you have an idea that you want to share and you want other people to potentially adopt, don't try to ram that idea or your opinions down the throats of other people. Make a suggestion and let the other person come up with the conclusion that you already know. Make it their own conclusion by you planting a seed of that idea. So he gives an example, even in terms of someone who's selling artwork. So the artist would urge his customer to buy what he thought was great art, but then he changed his approach completely, which is something that we could all do in our businesses as well. So he started, instead of selling his art, he started urging his customer to give him their ideas of what was good. So it made his customers feel like they were designing, they're part of the design, of creating that design. And they were. And then he wasn't selling them. And they would buy because they wanted to buy the design that they helped create. So just changing the approach slightly. He gives an example of someone who wanted to get the president to adopt certain ideas. So he said the best way to convert him to an idea was to plant it in his mind casually, just to get that interest in it and get him to think about it on his own account. So the first time it worked, it was an accident. He was visiting him in the White House and urged a policy on him, which he appeared to disapprove. But then several days later, he was amazed to hear the president suggest it as his own idea. He didn't interrupt him to say, that's not your idea, that's mine. No, he didn't care about the credit. He wanted results. So let the other person come with the conclusion, just plant the seed and let them, even if they embrace it as their own idea, their own conclusion, it's results we care about. Remember that other people may be totally wrong, but they don't think so. Don't condemn them. Any fool can do that. Try to understand them. Only wise, tolerant, exceptional people even try to do that. There is a reason why the other man thinks and acts as he does. Find out what that reason is, and then you have a key to his actions, perhaps to his personality. Try to honestly put yourself in his place. Say to yourself, how would I feel? How would I react if I were in his shoes? And you'll sharply increase your human relationship skills as well.
I think that's a good case in point with all the people that are protesting at the moment. I don't think it's got anything to do with COVID. I think it's much deeper than that. I think it's fear of some sort. But if you understand that, and if you try and see it from their point of view, then it does give you a better understanding. Because I think that, yes, if you just say, you know, they're wrong, they're bad, they have no idea what they're talking about, they do from the way they feel, they do. So, but it's trying to understand. Sometimes it's a bit hard to understand people, but trying to understand them is a good idea.
And he actually says in the book that is the most valuable lesson in this whole book, is trying to see things from other people's point of view. Out of the whole book, he's saying, if you could remember just one thing, this is the most important thing.
Yeah, that's right.
What everybody wants. So he goes on to what everybody wants. So wouldn't you like to have a magic phrase that would stop arguments, eliminate ill feeling, create goodwill, and make the other person listen attentively? Here it is. I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do. Three quarters of the people you'll ever meet are hungering and thirsting for sympathy. Give it to them and they'll love you. So then he goes on to, I'll skip over it slightly just in the interest of time. I'll skip over that as well. So when nothing else works, try this. The way to get things done is to stimulate competition. Not in a sordid money-getting way, but in a desire to excel. The desire to excel, the challenge, throwing down the gauntlet. It's an infallible way of appealing to people of spirit. This is what every successful person loves. The game, the chance for self-expression, the chance to prove his or her worth, to excel, to win. That is what makes foot races and hot calling and pie eating contests. The desire to excel, the desire for a feeling of importance. So throw down a challenge. So the last part, part 4 of the book, is how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. So if you must find fault, it's always easier to listen to unpleasant things after we have heard some praise of our good points. So begin with praise first before you give the criticism. So if someone makes a mistake, one of your employees, begin to compliment. I love how you did this. I wonder if we did this part that way, if it could have been even better. Start with praise. How to criticize and not be hated for it. He gives an example of John, who was taking a tour of his store. And then he saw that there was a customer waiting at a counter, but not one of his staff was actually paying attention to this customer. The salespeople were in the huddle at the far end of the counter, laughing and talking among themselves. He didn't say a word to them. He quietly slid behind the counter, waited on the woman himself, and then handed the purchase order to the salespeople to be wrapped up as he went on his way. Rather than criticizing, he did what they should have been doing and just handed it to them. Okay, in the interest of time, I just want to mention, I'm not sure if you guys read it in the book, but when you're starting with the praise and then going to the point of criticism, don't use but, use and. And he gives the example of the parents teaching the kids, but it's a long example, which I'm just not going to go through in the interest of time. Talk about your own mistakes first. So say something like, you've made a mistake, but Lord knows it's no worse than many that I have made. You were not born with judgment. That only comes with experience. And you are better than I was at your age. I've been guilty of so many stupid, silly things myself. And I've got very little inclination to criticize you or anyone. But don't you think it would have been wiser if you have done so and so? So talk about your own mistakes. It's a lot easier to listen to a criticism when the other person begins by humbly admitting that he too is far from impeccable. Admitting one's own mistakes, even when one hasn't corrected them, can help convince somebody to change their behavior. And no one likes taking orders. So use terminology like, you might consider this. Do you think that would work? What do you think of this? Maybe if we were to phrase it this way, it would be better. Give people the opportunity to do things themselves. Don't tell others what to do. Let them come up with it by sharing a thought, an idea. It helps them learn from their mistakes. It makes the person want to correct their errors. It helps them save their pride and give them a feeling of importance. It encourages cooperation instead of rebellion. Asking questions not only makes an order more palatable, it stimulates the creativity of the person whom you ask. People are more likely to accept an order if they have a part in the decision that caused the order to be issued. So ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Let the other person save face. He speaks a lot about this in the book. Thank them for their work. And say things like, it's not unusual for a person to make an error on a new project. And that you've got confidence that if you repeated the survey, it would be accurate. And say that praise publicly. It's not for the lack of experience or ability for the failure. Let the other person walk out of your interaction with their head up in the air and with a determination that they're not going to let you down. Let them save face. Praise is like sunlight to the warm human spirit. We cannot flower and grow without it. A lot of us are quick to criticize, but somehow reluctant to give the warm sunshine of praise.
I think in the book he says how much power we all have. He talks at the end, he says we're very powerful because we can give praise to other people. And that's really powerful, but we don't use it very often.
Very true.
But yes, it's a wonderful way of looking at the world, isn't it?
Yeah. Perfect. I'm just going to so make the fault seem easy to correct. Tell your child, your spouse, or your employee that he or she is stupid or dumb at a certain thing, has no gift for it, and are doing it all wrong, and you've destroyed all incentive for them to improve. But use the opposite technique. Be liberal with your encouragement. Make the thing seem easy to do. Let the other person know that you have faith in their ability to do it and that they've got this flair for it, and they will practice that in order to excel. So use encouragement. Make people glad to do what you want. Always make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. Be sincere. Do not promise anything that you cannot deliver. Forget about the benefits to yourself and concentrate on the benefits to the other person. Know exactly what it is you want the other person to do. Be empathetic. Ask yourself what it is the other person really wants. Consider the benefits the person will receive from doing what you suggest. Match those benefits to the other person's wants. When you make your request, put it in a form that will convey to the other person the idea that he personally will benefit. To conclude, I'm actually going to just end by stating what an exercise that he does that I thought will be great for us to consider. So I'm quoting what Dale says at the beginning of the book. For years, I have kept an engagement book showing all the appointments I had during the day. My family never made any plans for me on Saturday night, for the family knew that I devoted a part of each Saturday evening to the illuminating process of self-examination and review and appraisal. After dinner, I went off by myself, opened my engagement book, and thought over all the interviews, discussions, and meetings that had taken place during the week. I asked myself, what mistakes did I make that time? What did I do that was right? And in what way could I have improved my performance? What lessons can I learn from that experience? And that was it. We're at 1 o'clock, finished the hour. Those were the key lessons. Thank you to everybody that's shared their insights, especially Kerry, Debbie, Katrina as well. Really appreciate it. It's as we said, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I really, really enjoy these book clubs. And I think that you do a fantastic job running these book clubs. Look, you see, I'm taking taking a leaf out of Dale's book here, but I really do. I think it's fantastic the way you run these, the way you run these book clubs every couple of months. And it's just a shame more people don't come along, because I think there's so much opportunity for discussion. So but thank you very much. And oh yes, next book. What's the next book? I haven't.
The next
do you know what
book is how to get things done.
Oh, okay.
You've already
By
got
David Allen. So that's
How to
in
get things done.
2 months. So the last Wednesday of September.
No, the 29th of September.
29th of September. Really good book.
Well, I'll definitely be putting that in my
good book.
diary. Is it? Okay, how to
It's a
get.
really
Oh, I
good book.
think Debbie, I think you mentioned it, didn't you? Did it?
She
Yes.
did.
I think of some years back or a couple of years ago, I did a webinar, an internal pure bookkeeping webinar about that. I love it. Love that book.
Great. Well, I look forward to it.
Thank you, Ahmad, on
Yes.
my behalf as well. That was awesome. I did say to you when we were messaging during the week, I thought that was the sort of book that you could read during your Christmas holidays when you were sitting in the warm sunshine somewhere, and just to prepare yourself for the year ahead of how to actually live a beautiful life, really, and generating wonderful conversations and communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you,
That's great.
Debbie. Thank you to everybody for joining. Thank you,
you.
everyone who's connected on Facebook, and anyone who's going to watch this recording. Look after yourselves. I know these are uncertain and difficult times. Look after yourselves. Spread love to everybody, and look forward to speaking to you and seeing you soon.
Great. Thanks a lot, Emma. See you
Thanks,
later.
See you
Bye.
all. Bye.
Bye.